Now that is how you do a season finale. What a brilliant way to end what can only be described as one of the best TV shows of 2023, easily. Where the first season of The White Lotus was all about how rich people just get away with everything, this season really does show how rich people can get taken advantage of and really taken for a ride. Now, I have a few mixed feelings about how they wrapped everything up, as certain characters had some truly monumental sequences in this episode, namely Tanya and Ethan, but some of them definitely could have done so much more, for example Valentina and Dominic. But let's break down everybody's character narrative right now. So Jennifer Coolidge absolutely delivered in this episode. I was waiting for her to totally step up, as you just know that she has it in her, especially from the first season and from how this actress portrayed her brilliant character in The Watcher, and it seemed as if she was being wasted all season long, but wow, they definitely blew it up in extraordinary fashion in this season finale. So we all clocked that Greg and Quentin definitely had a relationship in the background, and Portia and Tanya then working it all out was just so good. And the fact that Greg and Quentin had pretty much set this whole thing up to kill off Tanya and to then take away all of her millions of pounds and steal them through the prenup clause. And once Tanya realized this, the sequences that followed were just so nail-biting, as you just know that Quentin is going to kill her off at any moment, especially as Jack is telling Portia that she really shouldn't mess with these types of people in the background. So you just really did feel so bad for Tanya, especially when she dropped her phone into the ocean and when she was begging for help from the sailor, both to no avail. But how unbelievable was it when she plucked up the courage to steal the bag from the mafia guy, and she was going through all of his ropes and weapons inside, and you could just feel that her whole world was closing in on her, quite literally. And she then just fights and plucks up the courage to fight for her life, pretty much killing everyone on board, and those that survived just ran away. It was just such an extraordinary sequence. And it is also really, really sad that Tanya was unfortunately doomed to die either way, either from the clutches of Quentin or from this tragic way, as she had the right idea in terms of escaping onto the speedboat back to shore, but she unfortunately slipped and banged her head, resulting in her actually being the floating body that Daphne found at the start of this season. On that point, I feel like they went back to the start of this season in such an incredible way, but it was just so tragic what happened to Jennifer Coolidge's Tanya character. And it really did show that in this season, rich people aren't going to get out of this season unscathed. But like I said, Jennifer Coolidge just totally delivered in this regretful ending for her character. Even though it was on a much smaller scale, Portia really did have some intense sequences with Jack as well, and it really felt a little bit like Get Out. Now stay with me here. For example, when her phone just suddenly went missing, and you could see some really dark looks from Jack towards Portia, which definitely did put a chill down your spine. But I absolutely loved how defiant Portia was throughout this episode, and really did show that she isn't one to be messed with. And in her sequence with Tanya, she was so sweet when they were kind of putting all of the clues together. And I just wish that they shared more sequences like that, as they were just so brilliant. And you really did get to see what a cool and good pairing Tanya and Portia really are. And you could also see how she was getting really sad right at the end when she realized with Alby that actually Tanya was one of the dead bodies in Taormina. But at least they gave her a little bit of a hopeful / happy ending with a potential future with Alby, as they had both learned a lot of lessons with their really bad partners, which ultimately has driven them back to each other. So hopefully, like I said, they will learn from their mistakes and they will have a really bright future ahead of them. Now we have to talk about Ethan. Now, what a brilliant episode Ethan had, I have to say. You could similarly really feel everything with this character that he was going through, about him bursting and being at the end of the line in terms of his patience with both Cameron and with Harper, especially all of the dirty looks that he was constantly giving both of these characters throughout the episode. I just have to say, Ethan is just such a classic character and really is one that you can relate to. I feel like the actor just captures this character's emotions so perfectly, and he really did know the truth and was not messing about. Harper finally reveals that Cameron did try it on with her, which ultimately pushes Ethan over the edge, and he was totally on the warpath, and I just loved it how he was just walking around the hotel, not taking any prisoners, and was just trying to find Cameron at any cost. And then their battle sequence in the water, where it seemed as if one of them is going to kill off the other one, was just absolutely incredible. Like I said, really nail-biting, really, really intense. But ultimately, both of these guys survive, so you know that somebody else is going to tragically pass away, at least at the midway point in the episode. What was really interesting, though, was that it seemed as if he wouldn't be able to forgive Harper and move on until Daphne plants the same idea into his head that she actually planted into Harper's head a couple of episodes ago, which is that sometimes you need to find your own way of getting back at your partner and feeling like you're on the same level as them. So even though now it's revealed that pretty much all of them seemingly cheat on one another, it somehow makes their relationships functional, which is such interesting social commentary in terms of the twisted relationships that rich people have. But it kind of worked, as ultimately he was then finally able to be really intimate with Harper right at the end because of it. So I just think it's such an interesting warped look at relationships. Now let's look at Harper, who was always good, as Aubrey Plaza is just so phenomenal, but I do feel like they definitely could have given her a little bit more to do and a slightly better payoff. Pretty much all season long we have seen the will they won't they tension between her and Cameron, and I guess you'll never really know if she was telling the whole truth about what really happened with her and Cameron in the bedroom the previous day, as Ethan seemingly wasn't fully convinced by everything that Harper was telling her. But like I said, maybe this is their warped way of dealing with untrustworthy partners, as they themselves are really, really untrustworthy. Similarly with Cameron, they could have given Theo James so much more to do, as he was the ultimate douchebag, and I guess that's what the show was trying to say, in terms of, you know, a player that's in a marriage that kind of feels claustrophobic will do really chaotic things, and they will sometimes be in their marriage through gritted teeth, which you could literally see when he was flossing his teeth in the first scene of this episode, and he then reluctantly talks to his kids, and maybe he releases this with other people so that he can then somewhat have a bit of a functional relationship with Daphne. But like I said, they definitely could have gone into so much more depth with this. For example, exploring more of the undercurrent rivalry with him and Ethan, him getting up to even more mischief behind Daphne's back, and just doing more outrageous things. So I feel like, you know, they played it relatively safe with Theo James's character. I love how confident this guy is, especially right at the end, in that final dinner sequence where they seemingly are just in a bit of a functional friendship, which, like I said, is really, really twisted, but I do wish that they would have done more with Cameron and with Harper. Now, Daphne was decent in this episode. Similarly, she didn't do that much, but I did love how these two somewhat victims, so to speak, in terms of Cameron and Harper's steamy flirtation, then got their own back together on this hidden island in Sicily, and that is what makes these two characters not feel like victims to their partners, and instead gives them a bit of an outlet to feel more powerful. So I just think it's so fascinating, as clearly this is an extreme example of it, but maybe all relationships can be looked at from this lens, whereby if the other person does something that you don't like, you don't want to leave yourself feeling really vulnerable and feeling really low self-esteem and self-confidence based. So instead of having a massive argument with them or feeling really, really even further diminished, just do something secretive for yourself so that you can feel better about yourself. Clearly this is a bit of a slippery slope, but maybe it's the only way to make things work, who knows. But I did love Daphne's line when she says, you don't have to know everything to love someone, which I think is really, really interesting. Alby. I absolutely loved this guy at first, as he was the ultimate nice guy that just constantly gets overlooked and is out of his depth with Portia, etc. But the way in which he was just so abusive towards his dad, both emotionally and financially, it just really, really put me off this character. And he always thinks that he knows better than him and is just ultimately manipulating him with the one thing that he knows his dad can't say no to, which I thought was actually pretty despicable of this character. I mean, we all personally know those nice guys that aren't really that nice underneath it all. And then, even though his dad was warning him about Lucia, he just didn't want to hear any of it, and I always thought that he knows better than him and thinks that his dad doesn't know that much and just looks down at his dad, and then ultimately does see that his dad was right all along. about Lucia playing him in the biggest way possible, but I guess sometimes, unfortunately, that's the only way that certain people can learn those lessons, as they have to go through the pain themselves. And I do wonder if him and Portia can actually be perfectly timed and perfectly matched now, given all of the difficulty that they've gone through in relationships. Now let's speak about Dominic. So he still is my favourite character out of everybody in this series, as I feel like he is the most relatable one out of all of them. He was trying so hard to be a really strong and good father towards Alby, and I do think that if he was a bit firmer and stronger with him, then maybe he could have made Alby see his point of view. But I think he would have ultimately caved either way, as Alby had the ultimate trump card, which is like, I'll say nice things to mum about you, which he knew is something that Dominic has been asking him all season long, and it's something that Dominic really, really wants. I do think that they could have played the Dominic, Alby, Lucia love triangle out so much more. As far as the first couple of episodes were concerned, Dominic was pretty much the main character, and I feel like he was a little bit wasted towards the end. But as well didn't have that much to do. Both of these guys are such veteran actors that, just seeing them on screen interacting with one another is kind of enough. But I guess the social commentary here is that if you're going to better yourself by going to another country, don't forget about the ones that you have left behind, as you can't click your fingers and expect them to welcome you back with open arms, which I think is fair to all relationships, really. What I did think was a really, really nice touch is that all three of these guys were staring at the same woman at the airport, which is a really nice throwback to the first time that we see these characters in the opening sequence of the first episode of this second season. Lucia really is the ultimate game player, isn't she? As we correctly identified from episode 5 that the pimp was clearly her friend, and she had just manipulated that entire chase sequence and all of the 10 sequences with her pimp boss and all of those extravagant, exaggerated sequences to get Alby and Dominic to feel sorry for her. And then she manipulated Alby to give her $50,000. Unbelievable. And she also got the money from Cameron too. So she really did know how to manipulate these guys. And if you think back to the first episode when she was talking to Mia, she really did say, look, I'm going to take money from all of these rich guys and they won't even really realize it and they won't miss it either. So she really had her mission set from the first episode and she wasted no time to achieve her objective, which in some ways is pretty impressive, but obviously the way in which she achieved this was really, really underhand. Now let's go back to Mia. So similarly, she was very determined to get her singing career and somewhat stole this from Giuseppe. And as much as people don't want to admit it, some people do go really far in their career to achieve their aims. For example, sleeping with their boss and taking advantage of the vulnerability that they have because of this. So this season really did show how Lucia and Mia really did take advantage of pretty much all the characters in this show. And I have to say, Mia did seem really, really sweet, but very similarly to Lucia, she knew what she wanted and she was not afraid of who she has to step on to get it. Valentina, definitely, again, a bit of a trend now. Definitely could have done so much more in this episode and in this season at large, especially as she opened up this season so well and was such a worthy follow-up to the brilliant Armand from the previous season. But I guess what they did want to show is that, Valentina did seem as if she was a really spiky woman, but after sleeping with Mia, she then became a little bit softer and was a lot more loving and was loosened up a little bit. For example, sending Salvatore back and being happy to have Isabella and Rocco working together, even though they are in a relationship. And I thought it was really, really shocking that now that she is sleeping with Mia, she is choosing and favouring her over Giuseppe. And obviously, that Giuseppe is now going to get lawyers involved, especially as Mia almost drugged and killed him. And still, Valentina is choosing Mia, which was absolutely crazy. So those are all of my thoughts on the second season of The White Lotus. An absolutely terrific end. I'm still so gutted for the fact that Tanya died, but so much social commentary as always. And really looking at the ugly truth of humans and an absolutely movie level ending that was both nail biting and just incredibly emotional as well. All brought out even more by the awesome music, theme tune and jingles throughout. Absolutely incredible. But now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of season 2? What do you think will happen in season 3? Do you feel like any of these characters will be appearing in season 3? Let us all know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.